What crazy ass story do you need to tell? The tale of the mythical ass squash. I had a job cleaning hotel rooms once. On my third day, I was still shadowing, and my coworker and I were on our last room, the king suite. We walk in and everything looks normal, just a little messy, probably 10 beer bottles lying around, a squash on the counter, pizza boxes, etc. As soon as we open the closet by the door, one of the nastiest stenches I've ever smelled slapped me right in the face, and I look up to see a brown sheet balled up. The sheets were supposed to be white. My coworker handled that, while I took the easier stuff, giving the beds new sheets, all the while wondering if there would be shit in them. Vacuuming, cleaning counters. Once she had moved on to scrubbing the linoleum kitchen floor, she remarked that the guests must have spilled something because the floor had some weird residue on it. I finished and was waiting on her. We had found some stuff in previous rooms that she had told me we could keep. Half-empty liquor bottles, little trinkets, so long as it wasn't expensive or something they'd come back for. I saw the squash on the counter and thought maybe my mom could decorate with it with fall coming up. So I picked it up with no gloves. No one used those at our hotel, and carried it back to the cart. Well, I felt a weird, almost greasy film on it. I thought maybe it was rotting. So I sniffed it and smelled an all too familiar smell. I walked back into her and said, "This thing has freaking lube on it." It all made sense as soon as I smelled it. The shitty sheet, the beer bottles, the residue on the floor, the lubed up squash. I was scheduled for the next 2 weeks, but I ended up walking out of those automatic doors and never went back. And that, kids, is the story of the mythical ass squash. Late one night my friends and I decided to go buy some weed. These are some of my nerdier friends. We met playing video games online and we'd play D&D together a lot that summer. So this was a little out of the ordinary for our usual hangout plans. This was also before it was legalized in my state, but I was in high school and we were bored. So the three of us hop in the car and manage to get a hold of my friend's weed guy, a guy he's met like twice, who tells us to meet at a Taco Bell in a town over. So we go, and the Taco Bell is pretty empty at this hour, 10 PM, suburbia. We get some Taco Bell freezers and wait for the guy. He shows and we very cleanly head to the car, do the exchange, and split. Easy. So weed guy goes in to eat and we bounce. We're excited because we're in high school and this is pretty new to us. So we pull out of the parking lot and my friend merges into the turning lane at the intersection just outside the shopping center at the last second. He forgot we were supposed to turn, so now we are at a 45-degree angle. Half in the turning lane, half not, but it's completely empty, so he decides to just make the left turn, even though the light is red through the intersection. Lights. Sirens. My other friend is swearing at the driver for being such an idiot, and I'm sitting here thinking no way this is happening. We hadn't smoked anything yet, but the weed smell, even in the bag, was potent and I could smell it faintly. My life is flashing before me as we pull over, and the driver quickly hands my other friend the weed. Passenger friend wraps it in a rag and throws it in the glove compartment. As I sit there trying to think our way out of this, from the backseat the cop walks up, shining her flashlight, and she asks the driver if he knows why he was pulled over. Yes, and that it was illegal. Yes. He tells her he thought it was dangerous to be in that position in the intersection, and he naively thought it would be fine to turn with no one around that late in the evening. Then out of the blue she looks at us and says, "Your eyes are looking awful red." I think we all collectively shat bricks. Even though we weren't high, this wasn't looking so good. Suddenly, did she know we had just bought weed? I had to think yes, and that she was staking the place out. So she leans in the car and flashes me with her light. "Why are your eyes red? Have you boys been smoking?" No, we all reply. My friend offers to go with her and be blood tested if she really thinks we have been. Skeptical, she pauses for a long while, then returns to her car. We have no idea what's going to happen and why she left abruptly. She comes back and asks us what we are doing in next town when his car is registered to Y City. He hastily describes us going to visit some friends and grabbing some Taco Bell before leaving to go home. This seems to satisfy her, and then she asks for my friend's license and registration. He leans across the center console to open the glove box. The glove box with a huge rag, covered weed bag inside frick. He starts trying to find the registration, fishing around the weed wad, and the cop is standing by the window, flashlight still beaming in on us. I keep waiting for her to ask what's in the rag, or why he doesn't just take it out and find the papers. I know though that, as soon as that bag left the compartment it would start to smell. But my friend is actually doing a great job. It's around here somewhere, playing it super cool while pulling out the wrong papers and returning his hand to fish around. My heart is racing. Finally he finds it. She checks the license, registration, tells us not to do that maneuver ever again, and we go drive off. We were not the type to go and do this shit, so we just nervously laughed our way home. My friend in the passenger seat decided he never wanted to deal with bullshit like that again and got his weed card shortly after. So I almost got arrested for drug possession my first time buying weed with my best nerdy friends, and that was some wild shit for a Thursday night. This is the story of the Oatmeal Man. My high school baseball team was traveling in a school bus from Louisville to Indianapolis for a tournament, and this guy pulls up next to us on the freeway, waving and trying to get our attention. We kinda think it's a parent or something, so we wave back. He makes sure he has mine and my seatmate's attention, and then clips his shirt collar to his steering wheel with some sort of homemade device, leaving a big opening. He then proceeds to grab two 2-gallon buckets of what I only hope was cooked oatmeal, not positive though, and begins pouring all of it into the big opening in his shirt that he's made. Everyone on our bus, including coaches, are screaming in confusion as this man is swerving down the freeway, going into the emergency lane to get around cars so he could stay next to us. Then, he reaches into his shirt, takes a handful, and smears the chunky substance all over his face, all while laughing his ass off and waving. Last but not least, he unhooks his shirt and it snaps to his neck, flinging oatmeal all over his windshield and driver's side window. He then casually waved goodbye, gets off at the next exit, and we never see Oatmeal Man again. It is my favorite thing that has ever happened to me. About 3 years ago, after high school, me and 3 friends went trekking in Iceland. We decided to splurge and treat ourselves to an Airbnb in the city for the weekend. We had been camping all week and ended up in an apartment that was nice, but had some really shady, scary and messed up paintings. There was a locked room that wasn't opened until the last day of our trip, when 2 friends went to return a tent we had borrowed from the host. He wasn't home, but his girlfriend was, and I guess, didn't understand that she shouldn't have left her boyfriend's Nazi Hitler room wide open, especially after hosting 4 Jews. We are talking swastikas, Hitler portraits, books, flags, everything. Somehow the girls managed to take some pictures before running the frick out of there. In the late 80s I was home from college for the summer. I went out partying with friends, got dropped off and home, and went to my room to watch TV. I put on CNN. At night it ran in half-hour segments that would repeat current event news. At the end of the segment, in a summarization of what they just went over, 3 pics would come up on the screen, tiled one after the other. So there I was watching news about Manon Riga, Gorbachev, etc. The last story they do is about drug use and the war on drugs. The reporter wraps it up with some high school project conclusion like, no matter what we think about drugs we have to accept they are prevalent in today's society. As she is talking the camera is on a city scene by a river. I recognize it. The camera zooms in slowly on someone sitting against a tree by the river smoking a bowl. A little ceramic thing with a carb on the end. They inhale, take their finger off the carb, hold it, turn and look directly at the camera, and it's me. The half hour ends. CNN puts up a pic of Gorbachev, then Noriega, then me holding in a hit of smoke. I run downstairs to see if my mom was watching. Then I stay up for 4 hours to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, but they never run the story again. There's a fair chance I'll regret putting this on my main account, but here goes 100% true. I swear to God, the worst shit I've ever taken When I was in the army, a friend and I went out and grabbed some pizza, and it was the best pizza I've ever had, at least until that point. I ate a whole pie by myself. My buddy is supposed to meet up with some girl online who has a friend that is interested in me as well. Things are looking good, but then they say that they can't hang out in town and ask if we can just follow them back to their place because it's only 20 minutes away. We are young and dumb and full of it, so we say yes and start driving into the hollows of Kentucky. About an hour goes by and they pull over. One of the ladies, the one that I was supposed to be paired with, just goes to the back of her truck and pisses for God and all to see. Turns out, it wasn't a deal breaker. All I can think of is that I also need to piss badly. So I get out of my car, get to the back, and try to piss, but I just can't. Like I'm trying, but nothing will come out. I feel like Tom Hanks in The Green Mile. It hurts like it's never hurt before, and after a minute or 5, I get back in the car, defeated. We keep following them another 30 minutes until we get to their house. Their roommate is a fabulous drag queen. A legit one. They were curling a giant beehive wig and trying out a few makeup techniques before a show. At this point, all I can think about is having to piss and also the sudden need to shit. I go into the bathroom and take what I know to be the biggest shit I'll ever take in my life. It's like wet cement, and it absolutely fills the bowl, several inches above the water line, which was just gone at this point. That's when the piss comes. Apparently, my shit was so massive that it was pinching off my piss tubes when I tried before, and now that the women and children were evacuated, it was time to get to the lifeboats. I just pissed into the massive pile, and it was not unlike when you make the mashed potato volcano and put the gravy lava in it. I did my best to wipe, knowing it would be a Pyrrhic victory, and knowing that if I did flush, their home would be ruined. At this point, I hear a commotion from outside the door, as my friend had apparently started negotiations for a 3-way and the talks had gone sour. I hear "get out of my house" and I realize that we've been given salvation. I go outside, grab my coat, and say "let's go dude, now," and he agrees. We get into my car, start it up, and suddenly their drag queen roommate sprints out of the front door yelling "what the hell did you do to our toilet? Oh my god," and I just peel off into the night laughing my now empty ass off. It was a pretty wild night. Late to the party, but when I was in high school and the few years after, my primary source of income was selling pot. One day I was just hanging out at home with the GF. We went to the Circle K a few houses down and got some beer. The clerk, who I knew pretty well at this point, asked if he knew where I could get a dub sack. I said sure, and that I'd be back soon. I go home and forget about it. An hour or two later I'm like "oh shit, remember, weigh it out and go back." He had already given me the money, very important detail for later, so I waited until he had no customers. He came out and we went around the icebox, just smoking and chatting. I handed him the bag. Now, there was no one around. Empty lot except for this beat up Volvo facing the record store next door. If I had been paying better attention, I may have noticed this Volvo had completely tinted windows, which seemed odd to do on a beat up Volvo. 2 men get out of the car and approach us. One tall skinny guy wearing 100% denim and another guy who looks like Dog the Bounty Hunter in a beige sweater. They approach us and ask how we are doing. Me and Clark look at each other like, "you know these guys?" Then all of a sudden, the flash badges and yell "PD. You're under arrest," and cuff us, separate us, and search us. Beige dog goes through my texts, finds a couple dubious ones, a few crumpled up 20s, starts trying to get me to admit to doing a lot of business today blah blah. Then they surprise me by walking me and my GF back to my porch, saying they've seen me come and go quite a bit and just want to make sure you don't have a pound of heroin in there, and they'll just charge me with a misdemeanor. Otherwise, it will be jail and a felony. So here we are, on my front porch, me saying there's no way I will let them in my house and to call my lawyer over and over. At one point, my roommate walks out, says hi, gets in his car and leaves. At this point, Dog explains that if I don't let him search the house, he's going to park a few squad cars on the lawn. extract everyone from the house, and wait on a warrant, and they will charge everyone in the house with every little thing they find in any room. I now know this is not legal. Then, I was just scared. My roommate that had just left was a total nerd with a great job. Straight edge. Rarely drank and never smoked or anything at all. I was terrified of him losing his job. Unfortunately for me, I had just had an opportunity to get a quart of mushrooms at a steal of a deal. My area was super dried up on mushrooms at the time, so I asked around and basically had all my deals set before I got it. This timing was perfect because just 30 feet away on the coffee table of my bedroom was 1/4 of a pound of mushrooms, neatly weighted out into ounces and 1/8. Top that with all the pot in there, it wasn't looking pretty. So, I proposed that I'll let one of them in to search just my bedroom and be done with it. I knew once I let them in they could do whatever, but I was out of options. Beige dog agrees. Canadian Tux stays with my GF, who looks terrified like WTF are you doing at me, and Dog the sweater hunter enters with me. I lead him upstairs and walk right past my door, which thank God was closed, and into the straight edge guy's room. Dog completely turns it over, takes out drawers, turns the mattress over, the whole shebang. As he does this, I quietly turn off the computer monitor with a background of my roommate and his GF glaring on it. Guy finds nothing, sticks with his agreement and walks me and my shit-eating grin back downstairs. My GF, probably assuming I'm going to prison for many years, is looking like she's about to die, but I'm just grinning. Guy still freaking charged me with a felony. Then they leave. Long story short, paid a lot for a great atty who was friends with the prosecutor. Since no money was seen to be exchanged, the charge was knocked down to deliverance of marijuana. The prosecutor recommended the minimum sentence. I paid an $121 fine, did 80 hours of community center at a local music venue, saw a ton of shows for free, and retired from selling. God, I hope someone reads this. About 19 years ago, 3-year-old me, my mom and dad come home to find our cat Nubs is missing. The entire family turns the entire apartment upside down, but no trace of our cat is found. My mom decides to make missing flyers, even though all the doors/windows were locked at the time. Days turn into weeks, then into months. She finally comes to terms with the fact that her cat is gone and has disappeared. Cut to last year lol. My grandma out of the blue says she lost Nubs. She says while we were out shopping, she decided to go to the mall across the street and took my baby stroller to hold extra bags while she was in the middle of the mall. Nubs, unbeknownst to her, wakes up and jumps out of the bottom mesh pouch under the seat and takes off. My grandma, being too nervous and scared to ask for help, just leaves the store and our cat there. Cue us coming home like half an hour after she gets back home. She helped us look for this damn cat too lol. It makes me hysterically emotional to think about what happened to my mom's favorite cat. This is the story of how our cat just one day out of the blue vanished into thin freaking air. Now we finally have the answer lol. Many moons ago, I won a year's stay in the US with a Rotary Club to experience living in California. I ended up living in LA and was at school for a year. Nothing really exciting happened other than being in another country. Anyway, trip home. My parents decide they are coming over for 2 weeks to experience the place I lived in for a year. That's fine. At the airport I go looking for them before boarding the flight, and they aren't in the waiting area as I had gone to the toilet just before boarding. They went on the plane without me, having been used to their son not being at the house for a year. They also had my ticket and passport. So I, a 13-year-old boy, had to explain my parents forgot about me, took my passport and boarding pass, and are on the plane. They go ask the cabin crew and someone appears with my passport and boarding pass. I get on the plane to my seat beside my parents. I go, "The frick was that?" To which people in my immediate area burst out laughing. I later found out they had announced my predicament to the whole plane on the intercom, and my mother had put her hand up with my passport and boarding pass. This was summer between junior and senior year in college. So this one time I show up to a guy's parents' house to pick up a mutual friend. Turns out the guy who dealt weed to all of us was there too, and they were all stoned off their asses. Parents are nowhere to be found, but the house reeks of pot smoke. I had an internship That drug tested, so despite how much I wanted to smoke I couldn't. As the only sober person there, I'm trying to convince my friend to leave with me so we won't get in trouble. As we are getting close to leaving, the host's dog starts going nuts by the front hall bathroom. The dealer investigates and turns to inform us that there is in fact a possum in the bathroom. We all call bullshit, but as each person checks, there is sure enough a goddamn possum in the bathroom. The dealer comes up with the idea to use a broom to sweep the possum into the dog kennel. They were successful in this venture. Then came the inevitable question of now what? The obvious answer? They hotboxed a wild possum in the front hallway. I got my friend out shortly after. Less than a quarter hour later, the parents show up to a stoned, caged possum in their front hallway, surrounded by stoned 18 to 20-year-olds and their stoned son. They never did believe that the possum got in on its own, probably through the doggy door. My friend and I got away squeaky clean. My father used to live in Kazakhstan around 2006. One day he was with his work friend at a bar when this tall, built Russian man comes in. He decides he wants to sit in a bar stool close to my dad, but instead of finding a normal, empty stool, he goes to a chair occupied by a small woman and literally throws her off the chair, exclaiming that he wanted that chair. My dad sees this and immediately attempts to intervene by saying, "Hey man, what the frick are you doing?" The Russian man then proceeds to tell my dad, "I'm going to kick the shit out of you when you leave the bar, etc." My father brushes it off, but then he notices that the Russian man's friends have started to join them. About 4 large men inside and another 4 outside. At this point my dad is nervous and decides to call the head of security, HOS, for the company he works for. Keep in mind my dad was the managing director of Kazakhstan at the time. The HOS tells my dad wait at the bar for him to come, and after some tense drinking with the work buddy, 30-some bodyguards start pouring into the bar, making a line from my dad to the exit of the bar. Because of the country they are in, the bodyguards all have pistols on them as well. So the 30-something bodyguards have made a wall of people either side of my father. After the HOS takes him to his car, but there was an additional 2 black BMWs that were there to escort my dad home. Not the most insane story, but it was insane to hear my dad tell it to me. He also said the urge to flip off the big Russian guys was massive, but he didn't want to risk it. What's the most illegal thing you could do with $1? Put 100 pennies in a sock and beat someone to death with it. How do you buy a sock? Fair enough. Buy 1 sock and put 75 pennies in it and use it to beat someone to death. Buy a butter knife and stab someone. Fun story, I had a younger sibling get suspended because my mom put a butter knife in his lunchbox and the school found it while he was eating. I was suspended in middle school for having ibuprofen. They thought it was something else and even had someone come to identify it. Nope, just off-brand ibuprofen. Suspended for 5 days in drug and alcohol counseling for confirmed ibuprofen. All I learned from counseling was how to get high off of Benadryl. Put in on a fishing pole and lure greedy incoming people into traffic and then loot their bodies afterwards for more money. Damn, this sounds like a good business idea actually. I feel like the kind of people who would run into traffic after a $1 bill aren't the people who drop the best loot. I guess you can make it up with quantity. Folded correctly, it can become a deadly blockage in the airway. You can then use long needle nose pliers to get it out and use it for the same a few more times. Most illegal thing you could do with $1 US. Serial murder weapon. When they are about to die, tell them the buck stops here and insist on being called the tax man in the newspapers. Hire the cheapest / shittiest hitman. I think you're talking about Trevor. Angela, so what are your credentials? Trevor, I started following people around to get exercise. Turns out, I'm damn good at it. Angela, do you have a gun? Dwight, Snickers, does he own a gun? Show her. Trevor, you tell me. Angela, what is this? Trevor, it's the receipt for my gun. Angela, you don't carry it with you? Trevor, read the receipt. That's a $300 gun. Someone could steal it. Dwight, do you have any idea how many guns Trevor's had stolen from him? Trevor, now I keep it in a safe. Dwight, MMHMM. Good safe. Trevor, oh, you tell me. Shows Dwight receipt. Dwight, wow. Start asking everybody I know if they are willing to sell me a bomb capable of killing thousands of people for $1 and then going through with the plan when the FBI inevitably sends an undercover agent to sell a fake bomb to me. Spray it with easy off oven cleaner bake, then wipe off ink. Reprint it as a $100 bill. Then, exchange the $100 bill for $101 bills and repeat. Imagine all the felonies you could commit. Give the dollar to an undercover officer for sex. Undercover? PFFT. Go for one in full uniform, in a police station. Offer it by trying to stick the money up their butt while it has a shitload of cocaine inside. If it's going up his but ain't anything a shitload? R/show her thoughts. Plot twist. Undercover cop is crooked and allows you to proceed and then gets uncontrollably kinky with some dark stuff and you end up filing a police report on yourself. Ask a cashier to make change for your dollar. Wait for him to open the drawer and commit armed robbery. How are you going to get the gun? No need for gun. Just make a pointy finger gun and keep it in your jacket pocket. 60% of the time it works every time. As a former gas station clerk, according to company policy we're supposed to give the money, even if they're obviously faking having a gun. So it probably works more than 60%. I think I remember an AMA years ago from someone who used to rob banks that said he never took a gun with him because that could make the situation so much worse. He always just passed a note that said something like "this is a robbery, quietly give me $X. Never implied a weapon or a threat or anything, just stated it was a robbery and his demand, and they always did because that was their policy. I wonder if you could leave the "this is a robbery" part off the letter and still get the money. You might be able to make a plausible case against robbery using the "I just asked for it and they gave it to me" defense. I'm not an attorney or a robber though, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. With your legal $1 you will print another. With the illegal fake $1 you go to the gas station and purchase $1 worth of gas. You now have gas bought with a legal tender. You sell the gas to some kids that want to use it for whatever illegal purpose they have in mind. You have now aided in their crime. Proceed to use the funds you gained from selling the gas to purchase more gas. Repeat until a substantial amount of money is gained. Never pay taxes on the money gained. When the feds show up you use the gas you're selling to light them on fire and go on the run. You buy a car in cash with the money you made, and with the original $1 you had you go to the strip club and ask the bartender for some change for the dollar. Proceed to throw your change at a stripper and you get your ass kicked in the parking lot. Bloody and beaten. You take some spare gas you were selling and burn the strip club down, laughing maniacally while the feds catch you. You're charged with and a lot of other shit, and then you explode because in your free time you learned how to build a bomb out of horse shit and shoe polish. What's the strangest thing you found in your house/property after you bought it? Unexploded WWII parachute bomb. Had to have the bomb squad come out and collect it. I'd kept it. There was a kitchen hidden behind a wall, fully furnished, with a dead mouse under the table that was practically mummified. Okay, you are respectfully requested to educate the Reddit masses on A. How a complete kitchen was missed from the floor plan, B. How you found it, and C. What was in it. The building used to have the upstairs as a separate apartment, and they built a wall blocking the kitchen. We found it because there were 2 windows that shouldn't have been there, so we had the wall taken down. Inside was a fully furnished kitchen. Stove, fridge, dishes and sink, even a small diner table and 2 chairs. Not me, but a family friend. He used to live across town from us in a sketchy neighborhood before moving with his wife to a house nearer us. We were over at his new house when he was telling us about how he was glad he'd moved because that house gave him the creeps. Apparently, when he moved in, there was a room in the basement with the locks on the outside and a dirty mattress on the inside. He said he always felt off in that room and rarely went in it. It's been a few years, but I still think about that house. It used to creep me TF out. I found a VHS tape from a defunct rental store in the basement. Someone stashed it away in the woodboards of the ceiling and left it there after moving. part of me felt I was about to get cursed by the ring ghost, but popped it into an old VCR anyways. Started it at a halfway point and found some crazy 80s porn. Couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of it. A mason jar was found on a shelf inside a bedroom closet above the door. It had piece of white fabric tape on it. Written on the tape was Jay's fart jar. I didn't want to open it to confirm. It went right in the recycling bin. When I was a teen, my mom worked for a cool little insurance company that was family owned. When I was 16, the family wanted to expand and asked my mom if she wanted to be the lead for expansion, which basically meant the family bought a small 2-bedroom house a few towns over and used the house as a second office. My mom was the only worker in the office for a long time, so I'd often go with her after school and just kinda help file and explore the area. One day I noticed a tiny door inside a closet on the top floor in the unused bedroom. So naturally I went exploring. The door took you through a small crawl space like tunnel until you suddenly dropped into a small room. The tunnel was like 2 feet from the floor of this room. It was unfinished without drywall or windows, but it had a small wooden spool table thingy, a single stool that looked pretty rickety, a teddy bear that looked fairly new, some kids' toys that very much were not new, a small box I couldn't open, and blank papers just thrown everywhere. The room didn't lead anywhere else and didn't have any other doors. The floor of it was super creaky wooden planks spaced just far enough for a tiny trickle of light to seep through. But I couldn't tell where the light was or what part of the house the room was built over. I took the teddy bear to show my mom and her boss ended up letting me keep it. I think I still have it somewhere. I'm not sure what the room was for, but it looked like a kid somewhere along the road made it into a hideaway. It was pretty neat, but super out of place for the fairly remodeled house it was in. A basement. I seriously bought a house and didn't know it had a basement. In my defense, the entry was through a long narrow laundry room away the back of the house, where the sellers kept their dogs. They asked us not to open the door and let the dogs out, and I just never saw the other door. I discovered it when we were moving in. I felt like such a dumb shit. Did you not get a home inspection? That was my first thought. I did, and the inspector went down there. That's where the furnace was, and the state of the furnace was in the report. I just missed him going downstairs. I was showing family the rest of the house during the inspection. About 3 years after we bought the house, we had to get a new washer and dryer. When the old ones were removed, there were so many socks underneath them from the previous owner. When I was 16, my friend's dad bought and sold houses and would pay us to clean them out. In one particular house we found a 2-man horse costume, a male blow-up doll, bag of pot, and sock and boppers. Anyways, we had a great weekend running around our neighborhood in the horse costume with a blow-up doll on top, high as hell. This is amazing. I would guess that this was not the first time those items had been used in that combo. As the owner and renovator of 2 100-year-plus houses, quite a few things. The guy who built the one house moved to Canada with his family as a child when they were run out of town for being horse thieves. He made quite a bit of money running horses up from the States, breaking them as he went, and selling them to the Northern RCMP detachments in the 1880s. Judging from the amount of stuff we found in the walls, he either put it there deliberately or was using the space for storage. Full newspapers, the one from when Thomas Edison died, is in perfect condition. A whole bunch of ceramic marbles, 100-year-old QP dolls. These are exceptionally creepy when you dig them out of insulation. A Model T Ford key, 100-year-old business ledger, hobnail boots that could probably be rehabbed, and worn random children's toys. A collection of some of the worst cowboy poetry and love letters, or a mix of both, and more. We had a small island in a field out behind our house that was pretty grown over. My siblings and I would go out there and play pretend, and there were several slabs of cement we would pretend was Pride Rock from the Lion King. Didn't think much of it at the time, but after a while we would dig out there, and it turns out an old barn had burned down on that patch of land, and it was full of old glass bottles and bricks with my town's name on it. My husband had a car that he bought off a friend. He had it for 4 years and the driver's side window started messing up and getting off track, so we popped the frame off to fix it. In the door frame, we found a handgun and 2 clips wrapped in a white t-shirt. We called the friend he bought it from and turns out that the car was sold to her from a police auction. We have this side room next to some stairs. While we were moving stuff into the room, we noticed a piece of drywall was coming off the wall, so we took it off. Behind it and under the stair were some way old toys, most likely from the 50s. In the same house about a year later, we paid a company to come put new insulation in the attic. When he was done he told me we had a portion of our attic sealed off. So we busted through, found a super old sewing table, and about 15 boxes of pine cones. My parents bought a home that used to be a funeral parlor almost 100 years ago. Dad had never questioned why there was a second bulkhead that went nowhere, and when there was a burst pipe they finally had to cut it open. Inside we found a small walled off room that had hundreds of old bottles, odd equipment, chemical/perfumed salts, stained glass windows from the original building, and a few old ledgers plus accounting books. Parents had no use for it, and a local antique shop owner/town historian happily took it when offered. We had received some cool old copies of photos of how the house originally looked a few years later. I just can't get my head around how big a house must be for there to be random rooms that you don't even know about. I need and use every inch of space in my house. If there are additions to old buildings you'd be really surprised just how much they can fit in new rooms in bizarre places. Last year I helped clean out my great aunt's house and there were at least 3 rooms and an extra attic that I found that I had no idea existed. And I had been to this house dozens of times before. Right? My great aunt had one of those houses. After she died, we explored a little bit. Honestly, we were collecting the valuables to give to her daughter. My great aunt's sister-in-law was a thief. Holy shit. We found a second basement. In a little closet in the back of the house, there was a trapdoor thing with a little staircase leading down to just a little room that must have been walled off from the rest of the basement. Nothing really down there, just some old newspapers and dust. We also found a third bedroom on the second floor. If you went into the bathroom closet, there was another door on one side that opened into a small windowless room. Enough for a bed and a desk and a small dresser. I kinda miss that house. Really wanted to keep it in the family, but unfortunately the rest of the family decided to sell it. After moving into our new house, we found around $14,000 behind the toilet. Apparently the person who lived in the house before us did not believe in banks. Had a friend who found $200k cash in a paper bag in a bedroom closet in a rental in Shippen/Cove area of Stamford Court. They turned it into cops and had to make a list of people he'd told in case that person came forward, lying to say it was this. After a certain amount of time it was this, net of taxes of course. In a Safeway parking lot on the ground I found a wallet with $500 cash at a low point in my life. Super broke. Losing everything. Was tempting to keep that $500. The voice of decency inside me urged a look at the driver's license. I took one look at the photo and knew I had to return the money. The face of a tired, weary looking woman stared back at me. She seemed worse off in the photo than me standing there. The address on the license was not far away. I drove over, parked and knocked on the basement suite door. The lady on the license opened the door. She seemed beside herself until I held out the wallet and she burst into smiling tears and thanked deeply. I knew my decision was the right one. You are a very good person. What's the most insane coincidence you've experienced? I was once mugged by 4 guys on one of the main shopping streets of Nairobi, Kenya. One of the guys had me in a chokehold, and just before I was about to pass out, they dropped me and ran. At the time I didn't know why. 12 months later, sitting on a beach on an island in Thailand, I meet a British couple who did business in Kenya and we start to talk about how dangerous it was getting for foreigners. They described an incident the year before of turning a corner and seeing a white guy being mugged, and a shopkeeper rescued him by hitting one of them over the head with a bat. They were in the same street, on the same day, at the exact same time I was there. It was me who they witnessed being mugged. What are the odds of randomly meeting up on a beach in Thailand a year later? I sold my LSAT study books to a half-price bookstore. 2 years later, I found them on the bookshelf of the man I would later marry. Here's my used textbook story. I once bought a textbook that was the cheapest copy I could find for sale online. It came in the mail, postmarked from the opposite side of the country as my college. I noted that it had minor underlining scattered throughout its semester starts, and the prof gives out sheets with study questions that we have to fill in the answers to as we do the reading. Guess what was underlined in the book? The answers to the study questions and nothing else. I did check, and the questions he gave us were not available online that I could find. Apparently, my copy of the book had been at my school before. I live in Australia and I have for almost my whole life, but I was born in Dubai. Every weekend in Dubai my mum would take me to the Hilton Beach Club and sit me in front of the pastry chef and eat. We moved away from Dubai really early on, so I don't even remember much. Fast forward to 17 years of age, a new kid at school had just moved from a nearby town. We became friends and we both loved cricket, and we practiced a lot together. My dad and I were giving him a lift home after we were practicing and dad asks, "Where were you born?" And he says Dubai. And the conversation continues, and I say I was too, etc. Then he says, "My parents used to be the pastry chefs at the Hilton Beach Club." And this blew me away. Here we were 16 years later, halfway across the world, and every weekend I sat in front of his parents and ate what they made for me. To this day I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I mean, what other chances? A few years ago I into a cab heading out for the evening in downtown Toronto. Shortly after being dropped off I realized I left my phone in the cab. I tried calling it with no luck. I called the cab company, but because I had flagged the cab and paid cash they had no real way of knowing which cab I was in. I figured the phone was as good as gone and went about my night. Many hours later, and having moved around the city quite a bit, I'm ready to call it a night, so flag another cab. Sitting in the backseat I start to think the driver looks familiar and realize that I'm in the same cab I took earlier. He hasn't found a phone, but I start looking anyways and sure enough there it is, jammed in the seat. Me and my flip phone were happily reunited, only for me to put it in a washing machine 2 days later. An American friend of mine by the name of Tom took his family on vacation to check out Antarctica. He met an Australian guy named Paul on Christmas Day in Antarctica. They didn't exchange contact info. A year later, Christmas Day, they take their vacation to Machu Picchu. He is looking down at a map when he hears, "Hey Tom, how the hell are you?" It was Paul, taking his family on their annual trip as well. That's just next level stalking. Never could explain this payphone incident. Saturday night out with friends, we decide to call my friend Al to see if he wants to join us. This was in England long before mobile phones, so we had to use one of the iconic red phone booths. Someone was already using it, so we had to wait a few minutes. Guy leaves and we cram in the booth. Now, in those days, in order to make a call you would first get a dial tone, then call the number. When the person answered you would hear a bunch of beeps, at which point you insert the coins. So I pick up the phone, but hear no dial tone. I hang the phone up and try again. Still no dial tone. Seems to be still connected to the previous call. I say hello to see if anyone is still on the line. Person answers hello. It was my friend Al. He had just picked up his phone to make a call, and somehow, miraculously, without even dialing his number, we were connected. We all went to the pub after and tried to figure out how the hell this happened, but it remains a mystery. If I did not have my friends with me at the time as witnesses, I would have believed it was my mind playing tricks on me. This is when you start believing the Truman Show is about you. In high school, my friend set me up with her boyfriend's cousin. Let's call him Jack. Jack and I were walking around an amusement park and started talking about recent family spring break vacations. Turns out, both Jack and I had been in Las Vegas during the same week. We stayed at the same hotel. The conversation changed subjects when Jack stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and said, "I saw you in Las Vegas." I thought he was full of crap. There's no way he would remember some random girl among the thousands of people there. He told me the exact place he saw me and that my sister and I were posing for a photo. We got back to my house and found the picture. There were Jack and his brother in the background. When I was in grade 2, our family moved from Manitoba to Arizona for a year due to a contract my dad was working. We rented out the house fully furnished for the year. While in Arizona, we flew to Alberta one weekend. On the flight from Arizona to Alberta, I sat beside a boy my age and we started talking. It went something like this. Me, what city are you from? Him, Winnipeg. Me too. Me, what school do you go to? Him, school name. Me, cool. I used to go there too. Me, what street do you live on? Him, street name. Me, I lived on that street. It turns out, his family was renting our house while we were gone. So I was sitting beside the boy who was sleeping in my bed while we were in Arizona. When I was 13, I was on a family holiday in Venice. We were on a gondola, Venetian punt boat, touring the waterways of the city. We got halfway down a long passageway, and another gondola passes us by, carrying a man and a woman, and the punter, the man and my dad lock eyes, exclaim one another's name, and have a quick handshake as our gondolas pass. Myself, brother and mother sit quietly, pretty stunned, while the woman on the other boat explodes with "What? Who's that? How do you know him?" We floated off in the other direction, comparatively swag and chill. Turns out it was a guy my dad went to university with and hadn't seen him since. They haven't even contacted one another since. It's crazy they recognized one another, considering they were both in their late 40s now, passing fleetingly on two gondolas in Venice. My family used to take little summer vacations. One summer, I was about 7 to 8, we stayed at a campground about 4 hours from home. There were a bunch of kids there, and one day we all started playing tag. I was it, and was chasing another young boy, and when I tagged him, I pushed him too hard, and he fell and broke his arm. I remember the scene vividly. Fast forward to college. I became good friends with my neighbor in the dorm, and we ended up getting a place together our sophomore year. The following year, no longer living together, we went out for a few beers and the topic of broken bones came up. I've only broken one bone, and it was my arm, when I was 7. Some kid at a campground pushed me over while playing tag. It was me. Still can't believe it. My first semester of college, I moved out of state. I was first to move into the apartment, and had a few days to myself. After orientation I found my new roommate sitting on his bed. When I introduced myself, he asked where I was from. When I told him, he said, "I used to have a friend named Simon." I said I used to have a friend named Will. We were best friends in 1st and 2nd grade, until his family moved. I once went camping with about 5 or so other friends. This was about 3 years ago now in Pisgah National Forest in the mountains of NC. There are some amazing waterfalls in this area, one called Rainbow Falls. It's about 125 feet from river above to ground below. If you keep hiking past Rainbow Falls there is a much smaller waterfall in the river above Rainbow Falls, called Turtleback Falls. It's basically a very slippery rock with water running over it, which ends with about a 4 to 5 foot drop. This is really cool, because you can climb up it using a rope someone attached to a tree above, walk out to the middle of the rock and slide down. There's also another spot that's about 1/3 the way up the side of Rainbow Falls where you can climb up some branches, then basically rappel down a rock face, shimmy out on a ledge, and jump about 30 to 40 feet into the nice deep pool in the river at the bottom of the waterfall. It was when my friends and I had climbed out on the ledge and were about to jump when we noticed that there was another group of people hanging out in the river below us. They started cheering us on and encouraging us to jump, as it is slightly terrifying. Anyways, we ended up jumping, and once in the river below we talked some of the other group of people. They seemed pretty cool. Fast forward 1 year, we had so much fun a year earlier that we decided to go back again. This time we camped a little further down the river, and we decided to climb on some rocks downriver from the waterfall, about 300 or 400 yards from the waterfall. I was climbing on one rock and found something that looked like a strap of some kind. Assuming it was trash, I didn't touch it, but when I pointed it out to one of my friends he noticed it was actually a GoPro camera in a waterproof case, so he decided to keep it. Fast forward a couple of days, my friend and I purchased a charger for that type of camera and decided to see what was on it. We start watching the video and see some guys climbing up the place where we jumped off the side of the waterfall in front of the cameraman, who was also climbing. The cameraman starts to get closer and we see something that made us instantly start to freak out. On the back left shoulder of the person in front of the cameraman was the exact tattoo that my friend has. When he gets even closer we realize that the person on camera was my friend who I was currently sitting right beside. Later the cameraman gets up to the ledge and we see me and the rest of my friends from over a year ago. There are also some pictures and videos of us jumping from the ledge. We watched the rest of the video in a stunned state, and the last 30 minutes or so of the footages of the cameraman going up to the river above Rainbow Falls and sliding on Turtleback Falls, apparently losing his GoPro in the water. After going over the falls the camera sinks to the bottom and you can even see fish swimming by and staring at the camera. Now think about where we found the camera 400 to 500 yards downriver from the bottom of the large waterfall. So apparently this camera made its way downriver over a 125 foot waterfall and got lodged in a rock 500 yards away. And my friends and I found it a year later with video footage of us from the previous year on it. It took us a little while to decide on this as being the most reasonable explanation. What is the best case of you just fricked with the wrong person you've witnessed? Interesting face. Not unattractive, just extremely unique, and she was self-conscious about it. She was cool AF, and everyone, including the teachers, really liked her. I was chatting with her in the hall one day between class when some new kid decided to tease her for it. She's cool. Tells him to please stop. He keeps going. She tells him to frick off. He keeps going. She finally has it and chases this kid down the hallway, tackles him, slams him into the ground. The students and teachers pretended not to notice. Kid never bothered her or anyone again. Robbers tried to get our house for a third time. Dad was home. They were chased down the block from a 6 feet 240 pounds naked man wielding a 5-foot sword. Cops caught the kid, returned dad home. We were never robbed again. Late, but why the hell does your dad have a sword? Also, what kind of sword was it? Guns were stolen. That explains a fair bit. Leaving of a bar, a girl from martial arts class was walking several paces ahead of our group with a couple of her friends. There were two guys standing ahead of where we were all walking, and we could see that they were sort of eyeing the girls that were walking their direction. When the martial arts girl walked past, one of the guys reached out and grabbed her by the arm and tried to drag her over towards him. No hoop. She gave a nice little instep and drove her heel right on top his foot, then punched him square in the solar plexus. She is a black belt and cold seriously fricked this guy up if she felt like it, but she understands what her training is for. It was the best example I've ever seen of anyone using their martial arts training. I wrestled in high school. There was a heavyweight that thought he was a shit. We see he was the biggest person on the team at 260 lbs in a friendly match with the 182. He cross-faced him, basically punched him in the nose. MR 182 proceeded to stand straight up and throw the HWT over his shoulder with ease and pull him across the mat by his ankle with one hand. The HWT didn't try him anymore. When I was a teen I went to a mall with a friend. We were eating in the food court when a little Asian man, like 5 feet 5 inches, was getting a strip torn off him by the blonde who appeared to be his girlfriend. She ran off, and the fella went after her saying he was sorry. Like some kind of magic, 4 other men appeared and surrounded the little guy. They were all 6 feet tall and well built. It turns out they were the girl's family and wanted to settle the score or some such thing. To this day the only time I have seen a knockout that fast was in MMA. The little guy beat all 4 of the bigger men in a matter of moments. It still is the wildest fight I have ever witnessed with a Mark 1 eyeball. Had a buddy who was friends with this big ol' redneck firefighter. In high school apparently some kid was starting shit with him. Most likely had some sort of developmental disorder. It was high school, everyone was whack. Anyways, this kid hits the firefighter with a sucker punch at point blank range square in the jaw. Firefighter boy pushed him off, pointed his finger at him, and said rethink that decision. I don't know why, but that story was freaking chilling the first time I heard it. That's like some Naruto shit right there, man. It's crazy. Reminds of something that happened to me. I was in kickboxing class sparring with an overgrown 15-year-old kid. It was supposed to be an on-contact hand drill. Instead, the kid whacks me straight in the nose. I told him to calm down and focus on his form. 20 seconds later he smacks me right in the nose again. and a little trickle of blood started coming out of my left nostril. I looked at him and said, "Kid, please don't do that again. You are really beginning to piss me off." He was very careful not to touch my face from that point on. I watched a redneck get his ass kicked by a gay man because he was taunting him and calling him names. Never witnessed a more well-deserved and thorough ass whooping. Happened in front of the redneck's girlfriend, which only added to my satisfaction. Both my former speech and debate professor and his husband do drag on the side. His reward for us at a regional event was that if we won, he would do his Liza routine, 15-20 minimum bit, in full drag at the end of the event's evening party. We won. Something he said to the crowd after his bit has always stuck with me. He more or less said never frick with a drag queen, because under that wig, or that makeup, dress, and heels is typically a very fit man who exudes more confidence in one night than most men will ever in their entire life. In short, she will kick your ass, and her friends will join in too. Throwaway because what happened is a little weird. So, about 10 years ago, while I was still living in Mexico, I had a situation happen that, to this day, makes me think. I was not much of a party person, but my brother was. We were not rich either, or thought we had connections. Anyways, one day, my brother goes out to a party at a club. He's about 5 feet 10, tall in Mexico, very strong as he loved going to the gym, and he knows how to fight. One of his friends, in a drunken mistakes, picks up a fight with some rich boy, to which a person at the club approaches my brother and tells him, "Dude, your friend is picking a fight with the wrong guy." Turns out, he was related to some gang or even cartel. My brother then proceeds to go separate his friend, but at this time, the bouncers of the club have already started mobilizing and kicking people out. The main bouncer was this tall dude who used to do MMA, and he's trying to get my brother to move quicker. My brother has his arms raised and walking to the exit, but this dude is trying to bring him down, kicking his legs, punching his torso, just to abuse his power. He can't, and as my brother is getting out, the dude runs ahead of him, turns around, and leap kicks my brother in the face, breaking his nose. My brother does not fall, and just walks to his car and drives home. The next day, after going to the hospital, he talks with my dad, telling him what happened, and we leave it at that. 2 weeks later, my dad calls my brother and tells us the next, "Hey man, so, you don't have to worry about this guy anymore." I was at a high school reunion with some friends and the topic came up. I talked to an old friend of mine that seemed interested in what happened, and then he told me, "Don't worry, I got you covered." I didn't think much of this. I hadn't seen him in a while, so not sure what he was saying, but, and as he finishes the story, he shows us a picture of the bouncer, beaten to hell, tied up to the train tracks. Brother and I were freaked the hell out. That next weekend, he went back to the club. The bouncer that broke his nose instantly passed him to a table, served them some drinks, and apologized to him, telling him that anything he needed, to just ask. That was the freakiest thing I have ever witnessed. Mayfair, I bet. When I was in middle school, a pair of guys were going around forcibly kissing girls as part of a bet. One of them did this to me, and without even thinking, I punched him in the face. He was on the floor, hand over his face, blood pouring from between his fingers, and looking utterly shell-shocked. I looked around, and there were no witnesses, so I leaned in and snapped, "You're not going to tell anyone about this, are you? Or I'll break something else." He shook his head rapidly, and I ran off to tell a teacher that I saw a student fall face first. About a week later, I saw him again at school, and he had some kind of cast/guard across his nose. The color drained from his face when we made eye contact. I still feel guilty. I still feel guilty. Don't. Back in high school, there was this small younger student who had something to prove. He was constantly trying to pick fights, particularly with people bigger or stronger than him for a while, and eventually he chose the wrong target. He went up to one of my classmates, a senior, and started harassing him. He'd hit him up a few times before, just talking shit, and got laughed off every time because hell, it's just words. I guess he said something really crude about the guy's girlfriend though as they got to the main entrance to the school. He finally got his fight with the captain of the school weightlifting team, who also leads the local school-aged rugby team. The teacher break room was right there, as well as the principal's office, and half the school was headed that way to walk out with them ahead of us, and 5 teachers watching. So, we had a pretty good audience to see this guy pick up the annoying little shit with one hand around his throat, hold him up in the air, and then slam him down to the ground, like he was celebrating a touchdown with him as the football. Dude dusted off his hands, then stepped backwards to wait for his punishment. It took like 10 seconds for anyone to even move, because the teachers were completely blown away. Several different teachers independently assumed at first that they were just playing around or something, and then realized that this guy had just been smote like a toddler trying to fight Zeus. There wasn't even a fight to break up. The guy was walking funny for a month afterwards, because every part of him was bruised on the back, and he shut the hell up for, I gotta say, like at least a month. My mom had this phone call on speaker. An insurance customer service agent was refusing to fax proof of insurance to the year my sister was in, because it was after hours. We'll fax it in the morning. It was in fact the middle of the night, but my sister was in Spain, where it was early evening, and they were refusing to treat her until they got proof of insurance. My mom said, this plan is through my employer, which employs people traveling all over the world, who are all on this plan. It was chosen specifically to deal with this sort of situation. The agent refused to budge. My mom asked for a supervisor. No one is available. Call again in the morning. My mom then said, well, you're going to want to wake someone up or just send that fax, because I'm the person who makes the decision on what insurance plan my company uses. When I take all 50,000 people and their dependents off that plan, I will name you personally to your company. When I do so, if you think I'm kidding, I suggest you Google my name. A quick Google result shows that she is in fact in a position to do exactly what she said. They faxed the paperwork within 10 minutes. My mom still called the vice president of whatever at the company the next day and told them that if she heard about this happening to any of her company's employees, they would be looking at other companies. I have never ever seen her pull any sort of power play in my entire life, not until her daughter's health was threatened. Okay, but also like, hell freaking yeah, that she went that extra step to contact that company's higher ups so no one else would have to deal with that shit either.